Okay, hormesis. What is hormesis? It's not a weird Greek word.
It could be, but
It could be.
essentially, we're going to talk about hormesis and what that means in terms of building resiliency through the body. So, what I understand as hormesis is allowing your range of what is comfortable for your body to expand. And when you start doing that, you essentially are also expanding your ability to engage in so many different activities, foods, environments, and it develops a sense of freedom rather than being more domesticated, and that range of ability to tolerate is so shrunken down that now you're only walking on paved flat surfaces because you roll your ankles really easily if you go hiking. So this is kind of the topic that we're going to explore today, and hopefully you learn something so that you can understand where you're at in your range of capabilities, and then hopefully there's some tips or tricks or inspiration to expand those. So do you want to start with hot cold?
So hot, cold. I guess some people call it a therapy, but I guess in the eyes of hormesis, if we were to think about the human body or animals in general and what they're able to withstand, um, if we picture our day and how our day begins and ends, we start with a cool morning. The sun's been gone all night. So if we wake up with the sun, it's going to be cold. And whether that's we're bundled up or we're in our t-shirt and shorts, as the day moves on, for example, today in the summer, we're going to have a warm afternoon, but then near the end of the day like this, it's going to cool off. And our bodies have to be able to um, move with that stress and not be taken down by it to the point where we could get hypothermia or hypothermia due to changes in the temperature range or humidity. Say it were to start raining and we were so gentle or weak that the rain followed by a little bit colder weather were to take us out, we wouldn't be very adapted for our environment. So hot, cold exposure from jumping into this cold river behind us to perhaps just sitting out here on a rock and baking all day, our bodies have to adapt to these stressors, and the ability to adapt to these stressors is going to make us more resilient to not only everyday stresses, but just um, anything that could arise in our day-to-day life, and also building up our immune system and these other factors inside of our body.
So with hot cold hormesis, this is truly a physiological change in our tissues and our ability for our muscles or blood vessels or lymph to expand, contract. And so one way that you can do that easily and naturally by just spending time outside regardless of weather. But sadly, what we experience is that when it's a super nice day, like the perfect weather, everybody's out. And as soon as there's maybe, I don't know, rain, or it's a bit cooler, there's frost or something, like even extreme heat, what happens is everybody stays in. And what's happening when they're staying in, essentially they're not exposing themselves to those differences. They're turning on their AC, they're, staying in their room
They
temperature
leave their air-conditioned
homes.
home to the air-conditioned car,
Yeah.
and they're never really adapting to that heat stress. And Bruce Lipton studied the phenomenon of epigenetics, being that there's like, what is it, twice to three times more genes that we program than there is the genes that we're born with that are stable, that we move on with and give to our children. So these epigenetics means above genetics. So these are the things that we can tweak ourselves. So if you sit in chairs at school in a temperature regulated room for 20 years, your children or what you're genetically going to leave behind is going to be better at sitting in a room, sitting in chairs. But the downside is our physiology is not made for that. So by the act of doing that, we're actually weakening ourselves and causing our bodies to weaken and become more susceptible to all types of man-made diseases. And we're almost weakening ourselves to the world around us. But if we get back into nature here and we expose ourselves to the ups and the downs of temperature and rain and wind and all these different things, we're going to build up our bodies to be more resilient. And I guess we can move into
Well,
physical.
I would just say one last thing with hot cold. So one way you could, like we just mentioned, is just spending time outside regardless of the weather. The other way with hot cold therapies, there's so much online, but you can just incorporate that into your day-to-day life with cold showers, or not just, taking showers at your perfect comfortable temperature. And also we have used in the past and still love a sauna. So you can play around with that, to just in your own home expose yourself and build that tolerance. And then of course the other way is just backpacking, especially in our winter, or wherever the winter is where you live. Oftentimes it gets colder and people just bundle up and stay inside. And of course there is some natural tendency to that, but we also want to be resilient to not let the weather influence our ability to spend time outside.
Yeah, so I would move into an easy example of physical hormesis is just going to the gym. So if we just sat on our couch all day, we wouldn't be very resilient or adapted for whatever life may throw at us. But if we're simulating difficult situations by going to the gym and say lifting weights, and we know that weightlifting and resistance training actually builds our bones stronger. So thinking like, oh, we don't want to stress our joints and our bones and stuff out. Yes, but to a point, because once we put that resistance or that weight on top of it, that's actually what builds it stronger. So our bodies require this resistance to grow and build. So going to the gym or doing jujitsu or Muay Thai or any type of martial arts or even dance or running, all these things are going to help build our body's resistance to the elements and to what day-to-day life can throw at it. So hormesis doesn't always have to be a suffering of the temperatures or these things that are a little more daunting. It could just be going to the gym. It could be walking more. It could be something as simple as that.
Well, and definitely with the physical hormesis, you have walking. It's expanding again your capability. So we could say walking. Are you walking barefoot? Are you walking, up a mountain? Are you just walking on a treadmill? So we want to expand range and variety. And yes, with of course there are easier ways, and in some ways hormesis is always a stress on the body, and that stress itself is what's creating the environment in the body to then change. If there's no stress, you won't have the adaptation. And so wherever you're at in your journey with exploring these topics, understand your unique capacity to experience different levels of stress. So I'm pregnant right now. We did an event where we did a cold plunge, and I chose not to do it at this moment in time because to me a super cold jump in the lake where we were at, and we didn't have a warm environment to go into right away, is a big stress on the body. And I don't want my body to feel that stress right now. But when I'm not pregnant, I love that practice. And so just understanding where you're at, and then gradually building up, by slowly building up stress rather than totally putting your body into shock and going a bit too far too fast. Because what will happen is it will actually create almost like a break, or it's an injury, and then you'll never want to continue that. Is there anything you want to add with physical?
No, I want to touch on mental hormesis. So something that some people we don't think about, and like a perfect example for right now is the bugs. How are these little bugs gonna just like get me jumping out of my skin? Or if I don't have the perfect, whatever the circumstances, the perfect blankets or the pillow or the perfect chair to sit on outside, am I going to be swayed by that? Or your kids yelling in the background calling for your name is the boss on your, like, so we need to be not only adaptable physically and with the temperature and these different, we need to be mentally capable of adapting in the moment too. And that's easier said than done a lot of times, but something we need to take note of as well is just how these things affect our mentality, because it's easy to become physically drained by a mental uh, issue, a stress and stuff like that. So even building resilience through something like martial arts or running, meditation, something that also requires your brain either to turn on or turn off, and something that uh, has a pinnacle for your mind to overcome, whether that's playing a board game or something that's making you use your brain to achieve a greater level with some minute stress that you build up to, so that when something stressful does come up in your life, you're able to smoothly navigate through that without freaking out. For example, I was hiking and came across a mother bear and its cub. Had I not, had I been less resilient and swayed so much by that moment to either freeze or have a panic attack, or like not being in my senses in that moment to know, like, okay, I'm gonna blow my whistle. I'm gonna say, hey, like, bear, we don't mean you any trouble. Go on, whatever it was the case. Having that ability to move through what could be a very stressful moment without completely dissolving mentally is super important, whether it's an instance like that where it's your safety, or maybe you just got in a car accident and everything's just rushing around you. You need to come into your senses and be like, okay, like, is anyone hurt? Or say there's an emergency and you're hiking and someone rolls their ankle. Are you going to freak out and pass out, or are you going to be cool, calm, and collected and able to contribute to the situation and help this person in an emergency? um, yeah.
I also think there's to add on to that, a philosophical hormesis where you're also in that mental space able to be open to more thoughts that are differing to yours. So essentially, if you stay in your echo chamber of what you know or what you think you know, and you stay there, you're still shrinking your ability to be open to, again, yeah, it might be a form of stress. We've for sure listened to people or teachers or mentors who push our limits of our philosophy, whether that's how we live or what we choose to believe in or value.
It's almost an emotional or social hormesis.
Yeah, and so I think that with the mental realm is equally as important as everything else, to be open and to expand that. And oftentimes there is discomfort, but it's less in the physical realm, but I would say almost or maybe more important. And
Yeah.
so maybe we'll end with talking about hormesis with food and then fasting. So I'll start with the food piece. So when food and medicine, so just adding wild plants or animals into your body, whether that's topically, internally, whether you're eating them or smoking them or just smelling them, all of these also require generally a adaptability period. So you might have a service berry for the first time and you're like, wow, that's so bitter. Or like, it could be a texture thing with wild meats or game. It could be a taste thing with meats, of course.
Could be a bitterness with a plant medicine.
Yeah.
Like an herbal medicine that just tastes terribly bitter.
Like different wild mushrooms, oftentimes wild foods. I'll take mushrooms as an example. Like their taste is stronger than your grocery store ones, and so oftentimes there's a hormesis that happens with wild food as well, and it can take the body time to adapt to that. So especially when it comes to taste, texture, comfort, whether again that's psychological or not, we want to build and expand those boundaries.
Absolutely. And I would say sometimes we can change our taste buds and start to become accustomed to something at first that was really bitter, but the feeling it gives us health wise is so great that you kind of just change your attitude toward it. And I've had that with herbal medicines and stuff before, where a tea might taste disgusting, and then you feel so good and it's so relieving that you're like, oh, okay, you build like a relationship, I guess, or a tolerance to it, where it's like, okay, I know this is helping me. I'm gonna continue to take it, and then it's less ick every time you have it, to the point where it's like, okay, now this is fun for me, or this is enjoyable.
And I think part of that too with food is decreasing your refined food, your highly crazy stimulus foods, and then you develop sensitivity. So we'll end with fasting just because it is starting to rain on us.
We're getting our hormesis.
Yeah, right here. But with fasting, so again, this is not something that I'm participating in right now because, again, it is some stress to the body, but we are so used to having access to food all the time, and being able to fast or go for long periods of time without food. Of course, these are all related. So as soon as you start building some hormesis, to others, your body will get stronger, and then something like fasting might become easier over time. Generally, you know, it's called breakfast because you're breaking your fast. So you would have your dinner and then you won't eat anything until you break your fast in the morning. That can be definitely time of year and it's seasonal. So, you know, winter fast might be longer than spring fast or summer fasts, but being conscious and expanding your tolerance to go longer periods of time without having to snack, food, get your sugar fix. Anything else you want to add?
I would say my experience with martial arts and having to cut weight might not seem like a wild thing to do in the sense of your natural environment, but learning to operate at a high level without food, you know, like it's one thing to do uh, a stage competition for bodybuilding or swimsuit where you're just going for your vanity and the looks, but when you have to go and perform physically at your peak while also not eating and cutting weight, yes, it's not, let's say, natural, but the knowing that I can not eat, let's say, for a week or 2 weeks, or have very minimal, and then maybe be on what feels like death's door one day and then still have to perform at my peak and pushing through those limiting beliefs and feelings of, oh, I don't think I can do it, or oh my gosh, how am I going to make it, and all these mental blocks that come into place. Knowing that you can go out into the forest and fast for who knows how long without the mental demon on your shoulder trying to discourage you for either doing a diet or being lost in the woods, or traveling for long periods, being extremely sick, knowing that you've beat these demons and these
Well,
just
the temporary suffering.
temporary suffering, or you know the cravings and all these things. Knowing that you have power over that does a lot for your mental and physical, uh, emotional, like just for your soul. The power that gives you in any situation is like, yeah, it's invaluable.
One last piece with fasting. So we just talked about fasting in relationship to food primarily, but there's also fasting nowadays from social media, from like phones, from internet. What would be another type of like digital kind of fast? Because again, these are all these like quick fix, really good things that people have access to all the time. You can fast from, you know,
Like any
artificial light,
technology,
any
yeah, like
technology really.
just
Could be
going
bad
into
relationships, who knows?
going into a room and being able to turn the light on, like
Or like
when you get out of the city and out of your home and into a tent, let's say, and it's
yeah.
like you can't just flick a light on to see what you're doing, or open the fridge to grab food.
Or also fasting from noise. And I know that sounds
Mm.
crazy, but a lot of people have a hard time just being quiet and in solitude. And so hopefully, yeah, in this video, you've had a few opportunities to question some ways that maybe you can expand your own journey of hormesis. And yeah, let us know, stay in touch, and we'll